I'm now being joined on the News at 10 by a faculty member of the Lagos Business School, the economist Dr. Adi Bongo. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Now, I guess some would say we're sounding like a broken record, but it seems like we're falling back again. Nigeria, in our own backyard, as it were. Where did we get it wrong?
Yeah, I think I overheard, and then I think it was reported some days ago that the EU is withdrawing overseas development assistance to Nigeria. Nigeria's economic policy, or international economic policy, or foreign policy, has been kind of chameleonic in the past, since after independence. So first, we have the three concentric circles of economic policy or foreign policy. First is the projection and promotion of Nigeria's national interest. The second one is African and economic integration, which starts with West Africa and then Africa. And then the last, the outer circle is the rest of the world.
Right.
Okay, so that was vigorously pursued after independence. I remember, because there was a huge inflow of petrodollars. I remember at the point we were paying salaries of in some countries, and then hosting the African Festival of Arts, FESTAC, and so on and so forth. So the country was awash with a whole lot of money to project interest abroad. We are also very active in anti-apartheid fight, struggle in South Africa, in the rest of Southern Africa. But then Nigeria has done a whole lot, peacekeeping in Sierra Leone, in Liberia, in the Congos, and so on. So we've done a whole lot, but the rest of Africa hasn't reciprocated what Nigeria has done for them. But then, talking about Nigeria and its economic interest in the rest of West Africa, I think there was a time when Nigerian products were competing and selling, very well in African markets, in Cote d'Ivoire, in Togo, in Benin Republic, even in places like Congo, Gabon. And that was the days when the shoe cluster in Aba, places like Aba, the clothing cluster also somewhere in Oyo State, were very active. And then that propelled economic migration of so many Nigerians to these countries.
Those countries, yes.
Yeah, so that really happened until there was a change in economic policy, in trade policy, that allowed, the inflow or influx, if you may, of so many cheap products from China. That completely destroyed, deindustrialized the shoe cluster, the clothing cluster, and all those products that we had competing in Africa. So that's actually what happened.
Now, you did allude to the EU scrapping all these grants and subsidies helping. How, in the immediate aftermath of this decision, how will that affect this attempt again to re-project ourselves in the sub-region?
I think, having cited our own trade policy, that's an internal, but there's also an external angle to this, because part of the reason why ECOWAS hasn't quite functioned as planned is the intrusion of France. Okay, the Francophone countries tend to have a different agenda from the Anglophone countries. And then when it comes to West Africa, I think there are more Francophone countries than Anglophone countries. So there is always this, divergence in terms of interest between the Anglophone and the Francophone countries. So France plays a major role in the disunity, or the lack of integration of the countries in the ECOWAS region, in West Africa. So that is another problem that we have. Then we also need to consider the divergence in terms of the colonial histories of these countries, because that tends to shape their foreign policy relations. Nigeria is a vassal state to Britain.
Right.
Okay? The Francophone countries are vassal states to France. And then over time, they've had divergent interests. Now, our foreign trade partners, the major, if you look at the list, we have India, Spain, and no African country.
That's right.
Okay? So the question is, how do we begin to revitalize or, kick back what we used to do?
Now, especially that we've lost the EU.
We have lost the EU. But I think it has to do with, again, building a competitive economy. First of all, we have to address the trade policy issue. Okay? We need to protect our local industries. Protecting our local industries means that we need to find ways to keep out Chinese dumping. So we need to have anti-dumping policies in the system. Because what we have today is a situation where the Chinese dump all manner of products here, and that destroys our local capacity to do anything. So in order to boost that capacity, it is very, very important that the government promotes industry clusters, strengthening the cluster that we used to have. And then that will begin to, of course, add the needed value in what is produced here, make them more competitive, especially in the West African sub-region.
Thank you very much, Dr. Obongo, for joining us on the News at 10. Thank you very much for coming in.